the media directs your attention to kinetic threats. 17 travel warnings in the Middle East. The volatility of oil prices tied to the prospect of war. This is the missile narrative, a calculated distraction. While you are watching the sky, the real vector of attack is being prepared in total silence. CSIS analysis confirms over 95% of global data traffic, the lifeblood of the world's economy, travels through a few hundred undersea cables. These are the true choke points. The objective is not an explosion. It is a global information blackout. This protocol creates the blind Leviathan, a superpower stripped of satellite intelligence and subsea data, is a titan with overwhelming kinetic force but no nervous system. Its global strike capability is nullified without targeting data. The immediate result is not military defeat, it is a systemic solvency crisis. When the data stops, liquidity evaporates. This forces an impossible choice. Accept a financial contagion that makes a corporate bankruptcy seem trivial, or execute a disproportionate kinetic response against an unseen aggressor. The vector from a liquidity crisis to a nuclear one is now direct and irrefutable. The motive is not ideology. It is insolvency. For a weaker state, symmetric warfare against a superpower is a pre-calculated bankruptcy. The kinetic cost of matching carrier groups and satellite networks is an expenditure designed to break them. CSIS analysis on Russia's protracted war illustrates this with mathematical clarity. It has become a domestic liability, a solvency crisis in slow motion. An unpopular conflict drains the treasury and erodes the political capital required to govern. This weakness is not an obstacle. It is the accelerant for a strategic pivot. Forced into a corner, the only logical vector is asymmetric. The objective shifts from destroying military assets to engineering a systemic financial contagion in the adversary. The blueprint is no longer about winning a battle. It is about making the cost of engagement economically impossible for the superior power. The model is proven. Reports confirmed oil prices plunging over 3% based on a single de-escalation announcement from the White House regarding Iran. The threat itself is the weapon. Kinetic action is almost unnecessary. This strategy exploits the core liability of a globalized superpower, its complexity. Every point of leverage is now a vulnerability. The recent bankruptcy of Saks Global following a takeover demonstrates the fragility. A hostile actor does not need to launch a missile. They can weaponize debt to trigger a targeted corporate collapse, creating a cascade failure. As Shashi Tharoor warns, great powers have lost their moral compass, creating a permissive environment for such attacks. The escalation is therefore not military, but economic. Travel warnings issued across 17 Middle Eastern nations are not just advisories. They are indicators of systemic stress. They signal that the entire region is a potential trigger for a solvency crisis. The choice presented to the superpower is a zero-sum calculation. Absorb a crippling economic blow, or launch a disproportionate kinetic response that validates the aggressor's narrative and deepens the crisis. This is the new doctrine. The battlefield is your balance sheet. The core of this new doctrine is not ideological, it is mathematical. A recent analysis from the Royal United Services Institute, or RUSI, quantifies the new economics of lethality. On one side of the ledger, a main battle tank, a legacy of symmetric warfare with a kinetic cost of approximately $5 million per unit. On the other side, a first-person view drone, assembled from commercial parts, with a kinetic cost of $500. The math is not complex. For the price of a single tank, an adversary can deploy 10,000 armed drones. This is not warfare. It is a solvency attack. This inversion of cost creates a protocol known as the democratization of violence. The capability to destroy high-value assets is no longer monopolized by nation-states with trillion-dollar defense budgets. It has been decentralized. The barrier to entry for projecting strategic, system-disrupting force has collapsed to near zero. A non-state actor cannot build an aircraft carrier, but it can launch a swarm of drones to close a critical shipping lane. As UK travel warnings across the Middle East confirm, the risk of escalation is now constant because the tools for escalation are now cheap. The objective is not to win a ground war. The objective is to impose unsustainable economic friction. By threatening a choke point, an adversary forces the superpower's hand. The choice becomes binary. Allow oil prices to trigger a liquidity crisis, as market volatility around Iran has previously demonstrated, or initiate a massive kinetic response against a low-cost, decentralized threat. This is the blueprint. Use a $500 weapon to generate a multi-trillion-dollar problem, converting asymmetric leverage into a launch-on-warning scenario for the entire global financial system. The battlefield is no longer geographic, it is systemic. The 17 coordinated travel warnings issued to Britons across the entire Middle East are not a reaction to disparate threats. They are an admission of a new reality. The entire region is now a live-fire laboratory for solvency warfare. While legacy media focuses on kinetic risk, the true accelerant is economic. CSIS reports confirm that weaker state and non-state actors now view systemic leverage as their primary asymmetric weapon. This is the blueprint. Destabilize a region, weaponize the resulting uncertainty, and trigger a contagion. The sharp 3% plunge in oil prices following a single statement on Iran demonstrates the mathematical certainty of this vector. Geopolitical rhetoric is now a direct input for manipulating global liquidity. This protocol is not limited to statecraft. The engineered bankruptcy of Saks Global after a hostile takeover is the corporate equivalent of a precision strike, a test run for collapsing a strategic asset without firing a shot. These gray zones, from volatile trade corridors to politically unstable G20 nations, are staging grounds. They are where the tactics of systemic disruption are tested and refined. As great powers lose their moral compass, a term used by Shashi Tharoor in a different context, the incentive to exploit these vectors grows. According to RUSI analysis, the objective is to create a crisis so profound that the superior power is forced into a launch-on-warning protocol, not for nuclear assets, but for its own economy, triggering a kinetic response that validates the aggressor's narrative. The distinction between a liquidity crisis and a military crisis has been erased. Every point of leverage in the globalized supply chain, every debt-laden corporation, is now a prepositioned charge. The war is already underway. It is simply being fought on balance sheets, not battlefields. This is the mathematical formula for checkmating a superpower by targeting its solvency. The doctrine is designated launch-on-warning. According to CSIS analysis, it is a protocol of last resort, a pre-authorized nuclear response triggered by the detection of an inbound enemy strike before that strike has landed. It was designed to guarantee retaliation, ensuring no first strike could ever be successful. The logic is zero-sum. The liability was always a false positive, a flock of birds, a solar flare. That calculus is now obsolete. The primary accelerant is no longer a sensor error, it is a targeted cyber attack. We call this the fog of digital war. A hostile actor does not need to launch a missile. They only need to create the electronic signature of one. By blinding early warning systems, or more strategically, injecting false data streams, they force the target's hand. The commander in the bunker now faces a mathematical certainty with incomplete information. Is the radar blackout a system failure, or is it the prelude to a decapitation strike? The protocol leaves no room for debate. To wait for confirmation is to risk the entire arsenal being neutralized on the ground. To launch is to initiate global escalation. The kinetic cost is infinite in either direction. This is the endgame of asymmetric warfare. It weaponizes the opponent's own hair-trigger defense systems, while markets price overt geopolitical risk, causing oil prices to plunge 3% when a leader plays down war, source number 3, the real vector is silent. With 17 UK travel warnings active for the Middle East citing escalation, source number 1, and a consensus that great powers have lost their moral compass, source number 4, the threshold for miscalculation is systemically lowered. The choice is engineered, a solvency crisis or a kinetic one. This is the new nuclear dilemma. A kinetic response is not the primary threat. The initial strike in this new battle space is a calibration shot, a limited, deniable attack on a systemic node to test the adversary's response time and political will. The objective is not to destroy infrastructure, but to measure the precise kinetic cost of a liquidity crisis. The blueprint is not theoretical, it is operational. The takeover and subsequent bankruptcy of Sachs Global provides the tactical model for a solvency attack. An aggressor acquires a controlling stake in a leveraged, mid-cap logistical firm, overloads it with debt, and triggers a controlled demolition. The collapse appears as a standard market event, providing perfect attribution immunity. This volatility is the primary accelerant. Analysis of market reactions to Middle East tensions, where a single presidential statement can trigger a 3% plunge in oil prices, confirms the extreme sensitivity. This isn't a bug, it's a feature to be exploited. CSIS reports indicate threat actors are now mapping these economic sensitivities to identify non-military targets with the highest systemic leverage. The calibration shot will occur within 12 months. The target will not be a major data hub or a Tier 1 port. It will be the sudden, manufactured insolvency of a critical cold chain logistics and customs clearing operator at a secondary port, such as Tampa or Baltimore. The event will appear as a localized bankruptcy, but it will halt the flow of refrigerated medical supplies and specialized components for one fiscal quarter, testing the U.S. government's threshold for economic pain versus a kinetic response.